The goal is that, so this is my husband, Big Joe. Round of applause for Big Joe. He is my technical assistant today and technically helped me create two beautiful children, even though I'm pretty sure I did all the heavy lifting on that one. Joe is here filming because I'd like to create a version you guys could use. So integrating the PowerPoint with the presentation that I'll give you guys afterwards. Not immediately. Once again, we do have two small children and full-time jobs, but I'd like, by the end of October, to have kind of some tools to give out. All right, so today's subject is communication on a multilingual team. Now, multilingual could be bilingual or more languages present on your staff team. Who am I? My name is Amanda, and I was a camper, a counselor, and all that stuff in America when I was 15, 16, 17, up to 23. And then when I was 24, 25, I moved to France, and I started working for American Village camps, similar to what you do in Colombia. We have campers that come to speak one language, but the staff speak a couple different languages. So we have to adapt constantly to the team composition and try and put into place structures that enable comprehension, that will allow our managers to successfully manage each camp session and diminish any small problems that can have a butterfly effect, creating massive problems over the course of the summer based on language comprehension problems. So we are English language camps since it's actually our 30-year anniversary next year, and we work in the field of specialized linguistic vacations as well. So linguistics is really our thing at Nacelle and American Village. All right, so I'm going to get straight into it. Today, what we're going to do is I'm going to present a top 10 list for you. These are ideas that you might use at an organizational level or at a managerial level to help facilitate understanding on your team. I don't think the presentation will take 40 minutes, so afterwards we can sit, and seeing as we're a nice small group, we'll really be able to exchange based on your needs. And then you will leave with a link to a page that'll have all this stuff on it. So you don't have to take notes if you don't want to. If you like to, you can, but I'll even put up the PDF of the presentation. I made some worksheets to go further with your teams, some links to stuff to watch on YouTube. So let's get started. The first tip is to identify your audience. When I'm talking about your audience, I'm talking about your staff members. Who are you working with? What are their native languages? What is your operational language? And what are their levels of the language? Because these are the different things that you're going to analyze when you are constructing your kind of language management systems. So, seeing as there are several hundred of us here, it might be complicated, but I thought you guys could first, get into pairs or with your neighbors, share your name, your country, the language that your team works in, and other languages spoken by your team. Seeing as actually there aren't hundreds of us, why don't we just go ahead? I could pass the mic, and you can each share quickly your name, your country, the languages, stuff like that.
Hi, I'm Alex from Canada. We run a camp that does English and French instruction, so half of our campers are English speakers, and the other half are French speakers. So our team works both in French and English, and we do have a handful of staff members who speak Spanish as their first language, and then also French and English as second and third.
Okay, so my name is Maria Fernanda. You can call me Mafe. I prefer that. And I'm from Colombia. And as I was telling you, the languages that we have in our camps are mostly Spanish, the whole thing, and almost most of our campers and staff are going to be speaking also English. That's the second language. And others can also speak French a little bit, but no, none of them. Oh, that's it.
I'm Teddy from Mexico City. We mainly speak Spanish at our camp.
Mike, I run a camp in China. We speak in Chinese, but our program is run in English, so about 90% of our kids are Chinese. We have expats from all over the world, including Japan, France, Thailand, Korea. And some of the kids come with like no other language than their own native language, but they've come to like China, they've moved there, and they have the expectation to speak English in like international school. And so we have staff from like 18 different countries, and the majority of them can speak English, but it's like limited. We've got some guys from like Congo and like Western Africa, so they like speak French quite heavily, and their English can be a bit of a challenge. Yeah.
I'm Tanya. I'm from Germany. We have mainly camps in Germany and England, and all our participants, so the kids, come from all over the globe, also the staff. So we have like, let's say 40 different nations in camp at a time sometimes. And so, yeah, language is sometimes a barrier in our camps, but within the staff, we only speak English. So this is the main communication language within the staff team. Yeah.
Hello. English summer camps, right? We have summer camps in Spain. The children, they're all from all over Spain. And we have a lot of Catalan people. They speak Catalan between themselves, but we also have Spanish children. And then we have two teams, the Spanish team that are the counselors, and the teaching side that the ones are give all the classes. And we have here Simon, he's the recruitment person to look for the English native teachers.
Yeah, what he said. Yeah, so my name's Simon, so I do all the recruitment of the teachers for the camps, which is about 100 teachers that we have each summer. And on the other side, are the Spanish monitors. But we do ask them to speak English with the kids in camp, so we're looking for quite high levels of English amongst them as well.
Great, thank you. So the first thing you're going to do when you get home and you download the homework I'll make accessible to you is really work on identifying who you're talking to. Because you're going to want to know what are their native languages, what's the language that they all have to talk in order to work for you, or languages, maybe there are two, I don't know, maybe there are three, but oh goodness. In that case, I hope you have an army. And then also try to kind of just gauge their levels. Are we mainly, Tanya mentioned everybody speaks English. Are they all the same level of English? Is it all the same English? Or do we have lots of fluent but not natives? Or lots of natives, sometimes intermediate? I don't know. So that's one of the worksheets that I provide for you guys afterwards to kind of just start your brainstorming. Because when you identify your audience, you're going to think about levels, but you're also going to think about native language and the fact that, and the fact that culture and society influence language. Now, there's a concept you might have already heard about. It's about high and low context cultures, meaning the way that you express language, whether it be low context, like an American, I'm going to spell it out for you. I'm going to tell you exactly what I want. Or if it's high context, like Japanese or a lot of Latin languages, a lot of Asian languages, you have to be able to observe and know what's going on to understand. These two types of cultures have different ways of interacting, especially at work and especially at camp where we're tired, we're running around, and we're managing a lot of different things. So these two concepts, whether your team are all high context, for example, Asian cultures are typically high context from what I've understood. Latin or European languages, which are middle, and more Anglophone, Anglo-Saxon, low, is going to influence how you organize the work for them. We'll talk about it in the next tips. This information also comes from a wonderful book that I advise if you're curious, called The Culture Map by Erin Meyer. I'll leave it here. You can take a picture and look at it later if you want. So you're going to identify your audience, and then before camp, you're really going to say, okay, I know who I've got coming, or at least who I think is coming. I'm going to make a few adaptations that can really have that butterfly effect all the way through employment. The first thing is to consider adapting your employee paperwork. You could provide translations for specific documents. You don't have to translate them by yourself. Go to DeepL.com, please. It's a wonderful translator. I use it. You can even have a subscription where you literally upload page after page after page, and it pops out in 1 minute. Wonderful. You're going to potentially translate some higher documents, and you're going to identify and eliminate any problematic wording. Problematic wording to me are words that are not transparent amongst speakers of the same language. For example, at American Village camps, we've recently shifted our recruitment all to Europe. And so now we're working with a lot of bilingual staffers who speak English fluently, but don't necessarily have the same language as an American. On our website, we wrote all over the place, overnight camps, overnight camps, overnight camps. And we started receiving questions from interested candidates. How late do I work at night? When do I sleep? Why aren't the children sleeping at night? Overnight camp, they thought they were doing things with children at the nighttime. So we replaced that word with residential camp. Little tiny change that removed a lot of emails and also helped clarify, I'm using a more neutral version of English. So when you do your employment paperwork, you're also going to think about the next logical step, which is your interview process. I was the head of recruitment at American Village camps for over 10 years, and I really felt like the way that the employee was going to work, no pressure on you, was intimately linked with what I presented at the time of hire. So we made some adaptations. We defined which languages were allowed or not allowed in the interviews, what technology we used. We do a lot of hiring from our centralized office in France, so it was mainly over the phone for a long time that we integrated Skype and now Zoom, because we know that people feel more natural when they're looking at someone to speak with, and when they're at camp, they will be face-to-face, so we might as well see what it's like face-to-face. It's not an English exam. It doesn't have to be hard, because we all know it's harder over the phone. It doesn't have to be hard. It needs to be natural. So that's what we decided. Then the other tip I can give you about the interview process is to really express your expectations for language use. Sometimes I draw a hard line, and I say, I see. Let's take the example. Mike is applying. He speaks French, but he's an American. And I say, all right, Mike, you have a great profile. I'd love to hire you. I've noticed that you speak French. You will not speak French during employment. Maybe on weekends when the kids are gone, maybe if the campers are sleeping and you're with one of the French staffers, but you will not speak French. Also, making it clear that for people that are interested in coming to learn your country's language, that probably happens to you, just to say, of course you can learn, you've got this day off, this day off, this day off, but you just will never, ever, ever, ever use it in front of the children, please. That's our rule, so you can really define based on your own programming rules. When are they using it? Make sure you say it to everybody, and you've said it at least that first time. If they're not interested, they won't come, but they're probably going to come. So it's probably okay. So that's all before camp. That's just the example from American Villages. Basically, we have English-only positions, we have bilingual positions, and then, of course, there's a tertiary group of the site staff, the cook, the janitors. They're all French-only, but we don't hire them because we rent our sites. So the bilingual positions are really the bridge for the technical team. I call that a bridge, a person that's going to kind of go back and forth. And we have English-only positions where an applicant can completely apply and be hired in English. They don't have to speak French to work at our camps for these positions. And these are the majority of the positions. Number 4, fourth tip. We're going to look at your first days. So now we're going to slide into the role of more of a director, a manager, someone that's with the teams. In your first days, you know that groups are going to emerge. And the last thing you want when you're managing a multilingual team is that the groups emerge based on culture and language, because they're going to become very clearly defined cliques, in my experience. So sometimes you're going to take a look around, you're going to decide what can I do to foster group-wide comprehension and communication. 3 ideas. When you're planning your first days, plan some neutral conversation starters. Neutral. What are you talking about? What I'm talking about is people coming from specific cultures have things in common already. And if they start talking about those things, people from other cultures can be excluded. A very clear example is when we would hire Americans directly from America, and you'd have 8 Americans and 4 French, and the Americans would start talking about something on TV. We don't have the same shows. Sometimes, yes, thanks to, whatever streaming platform you use, but at the time, at least, it was not the case. And it instantly created inside jokes and points of reference that the Frenchies weren't getting, and they were excluded. So as a director at that time, I would kind of come in and talk more about travel, or talk more about something that, as I had seen all their CVs, I knew that they all more or less had something to say about. Another planning tip is nonverbal icebreaker games. Now, I'm not talking about not talking during icebreaker games and miming everything. I'm talking about balancing icebreaker games where language use is not necessarily required, language production during the game, or where the explanation of the game is simplified. It can be shown with minimal words, and you're giving everyone equal footing on understanding what's going on. Because if somebody isn't understanding what's going on, they might not participate. The third planning tip is really, if you feel the need, especially if you've got lots of people coming from all over the place, dedicate a time for cultural sharing and tell them during recruitment so that they think to bring or provide something to share, whether it be food or a dance or anything, something fun, but that's coming from you, that's coming from the director, you're promoting their individuality. So first days are gone by, you've put into place all this stuff, you're so happy, everything's going great. What's next? We are probably going to observe. You're going to keep an eye on your team. You're going to say, okay, is there really group-wide communication happening? Or is it very selective? And this can happen in times when they're working and in times when they're off. We've all seen it happen. There's a group that forms. They're all going to the beach or this or that, but there's another group that has not been invited. Or we've all seen it happen. Selective communication on a team, meaning I'm constantly going to the same person to express information and omitting other people. So what you want is group-wide communication, or at least team-wide, based on how your team is organized. So the best thing, in my opinion, to do is to observe, and if you see that there is need for change, adapt. Adapt within reason, but adapt. In this book that I mentioned that's really interesting, Erin Meyer talks about concentrating on a larger goal. So for example, she says, if you've got she was talking about multicultural groups versus monocultural groups. She says, if you have a multicultural group, they'll be more creative. If you have a monocultural group, they'll be more efficient. So if your goal is to be creative, consider mixing them up. Maybe you choose the groups for specific tasks. And if your goal is efficiency, you've got 2 hours until the parents come and the site is a wreck, maybe you leave them in their cliques and you let them go for whatever you can get out of them. The one thing that I insist upon seeing is, you may have people with different levels of English or of Spanish or whatever languages you're speaking. Catalan, is to not change everything. And really, if you're one of the people like me who manages directors, be very clear about that. Adapting doesn't mean changing everything from Monday to Tuesday, from Tuesday to Wednesday, from Wednesday to Thursday. That's bad management on a holistic goal, but it's also impossible for a language learner to understand what's going on if they can't see and repeat processes. So I genuinely believe that when we adapt, we explain, we give context, and we do it as a team. Adapting, not changing everything from day to day. All right, my 7th tip for you today is going to be, don't underestimate nonverbal communication. Now, nonverbal communication is something that we all do without even realizing it. It can be so many different things. So actually, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Maybe we could do something. What do we know already? How much time do we have? Do we have time to do a little? Oh, doing great, guys. We're just powering through this. So why don't you all get up and come over here? We're going to do a little activity, if you don't mind. If you want to stay seated, but be more fun over here. So we're going to come over here and make a circle. You can make a circle. Where did my tags? All right, we're going to do something. It's just a silly activity. You can adapt with your teams based on your need. We're going to play charades. Quick game of charades. And this is based on nonverbal communication. So I'll give you a card. You're going to look at it. Make sure you know the word. If you don't know the word, but I think it'd be okay, ask me. And we'll go around the circle, and you need to, without using any noises, any words, just express what you read on the card, and if you think you've got it, just shout it out. So we'll see how quickly we can go through each one of these cards without using any words, without using any noises. All right, should we start on this end and go around? And as soon as they get it out, it's like, let's say you do your thing. If somebody says it, you lift your arm up, and that's the signal to the next person to go. We're going to see how quick we can get through these. All right, go.
Mad.
Frustrated. Sad. Confused. Happy. Shy.
What was that? What was that? Yeah, like 20 seconds, 30 seconds. All right, you can go sit back down. That was just a way to get up. Oh, you can keep your emotion if you feel attached to it.
Frustrated.
So confused.
Story of my life.
So, emotional charades is just one example of an activity that helps us to understand how powerful nonverbal communication is. Just for info, the little cards I made, I put them in a PDF and they're on the link I'll give you later. Yes, you can adapt them in any way. I do it sometimes with my counselors as they're working with French children who don't understand what they're saying sometimes. I want the counselors to have an understanding of what they're expressing that may not be the words and how that kind of needs to match up, but you could do it with a team, you could do it really with anybody. Because nonverbal communication is the way, you know, it's visual corporal language, non-visual corporal language, but it's also a lot of different things, and this can change from culture to culture. I think space and the way we occupy space is huge, and it's something that we never talk about. I'm someone that, you know, at the beginning, I'll take your tag and to read your name. I noticed that was bothering some people, so I stopped. There are some people that are close talkers, some people that keep their distance. Where do we put our hands? Obviously, there's, you know, a lot to say about how we dress and things like that. It's typically not too much of a problem at camp because we're all leisure casual or whatever. But it can be something to take into consideration. A huge one for me that I've noticed with teams is timekeeping. I think people come to Spain. If a German comes to Spain, what is their experience, Tanya?
Well, Germans are always on time, waiting for hours for everybody else.
Yes, and in Spain, I think it's, at least from what I've understood, it's kind of more chill. Times are suggestive, and everyone will be there, and we'll get things done. You know, France is kind of between the two, I guess. I don't know, but I think that as a manager, having that timekeeping is important when we're working with different cultures. I also think timing is important when you're working with people with different levels of language. Who here, by show of hands, who here is very tired at the end of day when you're working in your second or third language? Your brain hurts. So maybe organizing your team meeting at 10 p.m. after all the day activities, keep that in mind. That you might not be able to change the time, but adapt. We'll talk about that later. It's part of my next tips. But keeping into mind timing and timekeeping, space, and then all of the kind of obvious things about nonverbal communication. My last little things just to throw out there, because I am obsessed with language learning. I'd encourage your managers as well to relay kindness in facial expressions. Smiling, it's free. Ensure correct volume. That's something that can be quite insulting, is if someone has a lower level of the language and you just start speaking louder. We see it in movies, I think. It's a kind of a meme. Consider timing. We just talked about that in terms of meetings and things. And then use appropriate gestures. So up here I put gesture. These three gestures are okay with me in my culture. Do these mean anything insulting in any of your cultures? Yeah. No. Okay. So this one is like peace in my culture. Is it something else in your culture? Okay. Like that? Oh. What is that? I don't know that.
It's like FU. You're French. You should know this.
Yes, French people should know this.
You were doing streets. Hey, everyone.
This? I don't.
This is FU. Yeah.
Oh, I hope I haven't been doing that.
No. So you've got to be careful the way you say to.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. In France, they say tu like this.
Yeah, that's why.
Ah. This one. A-okay. This one's okay. This one, you do it in front. It's like, oh, I hope so. You do it in the back. Means I'm lying to you in English, American English. So there are lots of little tiny things. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, YouTube is a wonderful source for all types of videos on gestures and nonverbal communication. It can be a lot of fun. Number 8. You're with your team, you're doing everything right, and you want to make sure that you promote understanding. It's coming from you, the manager, the structure. So one thing we read about in that book, for example, but it's already something that we've been doing in American villages for years. I've been there for 15 years, and these processes have been in place at least since I've been there. Is that multicultural teams need low context processes. So let's come back to low context cultures. We're talking English. We're talking clarity. Tell me exactly what you want. At American Village, we have different boards that are in our meeting room that enable the counselors to know what they're expected to do, to know how the counselors are organizing activities. If you're on English classes, maybe you don't know what's happening in the afternoon. We also go through the day, because we have a typical day, but there are things that are different. There could be field trip day, or there could be arrival day. And the thing to know is that some people from France, maybe they see that as insulting, like, come on, I'm here, I'm in the meeting, I'm listening, I don't need you to repeat it. But we explain it's just part of our culture. It's just the way we do it to make sure everybody knows what they're doing, whether they're in the meeting or not, whether they're tired that day. They can always go in, they can look at the board. So these are rotating tasks for each day. These are activities, sunny, rainy, evening program. And this is the day written out in pen with counselors assigned. We use camp names. So counselors assigned to different tasks. Number 9. I'm going to encourage you to reduce miscommunication. So in preparing this presentation, I was reading up on a bunch of different things, and my eye kept being drawn to certain topics, and I really kind of defined for myself 3 common sources of miscommunication, regardless of language and all that. So first, there's a message. So if your message is not clear, if it is too full of linguistic nuance, if you're using nonverbal cues that relate a different piece of information, if you tell your staff, be nicer with the kids. Okay, I'm going to try to be nice after you were just really, really not nice with me. And then the mode of communication. Are you communicating clearly through through a mode that has been understood well? For example, a very long email with no punctuation is not a clear mode of communication for people. So there's the message that can be a source of miscommunication. There's the person that you're talking to, the person that's across from you. Maybe they have assumptions about what's already going to happen, or about you, or about the camp, or about anything. Maybe there are emotional factors. We're camp counselors. We're exhausted half the time. We're happy to be at camp, but it's a tiring job. Or maybe on a personal level, they just receive some bad information. I don't know. There can be emotional factors that we're not taking into consideration when we're just talking with someone. And there can be lack of active listening. That can come from a person, or that can come from timing. That can come from distractions. That can come from your phone mic. Just, He's giving me a 5-star rating. That's what he's doing. The third source of miscommunication is the environment. So this is something that, as a language learner, I learned French in France. And when there's a lot going on, I have a harder time paying attention. Now it's easier than it was in the past, but the environment really, I get distracted. If there's a lot of noise, I have to sit very close to really follow. Fatigue, huge for when it's your second, third language. Distance from the speaker, I tend to sit in the very front because it keeps me concentrated. And then communication overload. This is just like a thing to me that is so important to take into consideration these days with emails and with texts and with this and with that. If you spam your counselors with info, PDFs and emails and this and that, don't expect them to integrate all that information. Communication overload, dudes. So try and, really organize your conversations with them, whether they be written or spoken, by honing your message. What are you really saying to this person and how are you saying it? Know the person, adapt if possible, not always possible, and then organize your environment to reduce distractions, to reduce fatigue, to reduce distance, things like that. And then the last tip I can give you is really just to put responsibility where it lies, and that's on you. The director, the manager, the recruiter, the person. Lead by example, because you can't master every language, and you can't know every person that you're going to work with. You can't really, you can try to understand, but you're not them. But what you can do is you can respect the different things you're putting into place with them, and you can really try to embody the way that you want them to communicate. It's really the golden rule for camps, at least in America where I grew up. And so I hope that makes sense to all of you as camp professionals. That's my top 10. If you want to scan the QR code, I've made you guys a little website, a page on our website that has the top 10 lists, short version. You've got some worksheets. You've got a couple different things you can work on with your team or individually. I put a couple links to a couple YouTube videos, things like that you might find interesting. If you want, you can stay in touch with me. If you have questions or ideas afterwards, I'd be happy to stay in contact. Thank you very much.